Hello and welcome to Mining Review Africa. And today I'm speaking to Andrew Naylor of the World Gold Council about artisanal and small-scale gold mining. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Jared.
Okay, now let me start by asking you, what is the World Gold Council's view on ASGM?
The World Gold Council, our function and remit is to improve the integrity of the global gold market. And ASGM now accounts for about 20% of annual supply. 15, 20 years ago, it was less than 4%. Yeah. So it's a significant part of the gold supply chain. So our view is that it's an issue that really has to be addressed from two angles. There's the development angle. There's economic and social reasons for people turning to ASGM. It's a source of livelihood. Mm-hmm. But it also has quite significant vulnerabilities around the use of mercury, child labor, poor environmental and social performance, the influence and involvement of illicit finance and illicit actors. Yeah. So it requires this sort of two-pronged approach. We need to create a mechanism by which legitimate ASGM can be helped, supported, formalized, and ultimately given access to the international market. But then also on the other side, we need to look at enforcement, which includes things like customs control, tightening borders, clamping down on illegal mining. And so this two-pronged approach is what we hope will create legitimate channels that encourage and incentivize further formalization and support legitimate ASGM, but also reduce opportunities for illicit ASGM to enter the formal supply chain.
Absolutely. Now, Andrew, can you tell me, do you have any numbers around as to just how big ASGM contributes to the global gold mining supply?
It's a very interesting question because it's a very, very opaque market. It's very hard to quantify the amount of ASGM output and certainly putting a value on. So conservative estimates suggest about 20% of supply now comes from ASGM sources. We could be talking of 800, 900, 1,000 tons of gold per year, so it's very significant. Now, not all of that is illicit or illegitimate. We've done a bit of analysis to try and quantify the amount of illicit flows that come from the ASGM sector. We thought a couple of years ago it was around about $80 billion. If you just think about the increase in the gold price, you can almost double that. So we're talking about $150 billion per year of illicit financial flows coming from ASGM.
Okay. Now, Andrew, here in Africa, the definition of artisanal mining is varied from country to country. When we look at South Africa, for instance, it's mainly illegal operations. Yet if you look at countries like Rwanda, Ghana, which is a big gold producer, there is a move to formalize them. So how do we ensure that those that are genuinely contributing to a legal gold mining supply are protected and ensure that they are empowered economically as well?
I think we need to look at the capital provision and the availability of capital to artisanal gold miners, because it's the provision of capital that allows certain entities and individuals to take control. It's through the provision of plant and machinery, mining equipment, mercury, processing plant and machinery. This is how illicit actors can get involved in the supply chain. It's a very hard issue to tackle because of the broader macroeconomic and social drivers that are encouraging people to enter into ASGM. I think we just have to accept it's a part of the supply chain. It's going to be mined artisanally, especially with the gold price as it is now and potentially in the future. So the way to break that chain of illicit influence in the sector is to look at the processing primarily. Mm-hmm. And if you can create formalized processing plants that don't use mercury, that potentially use cyanide or washing plants, depending on the feedstock material, or different ways of processing gold, depending on the geology and the origin. If you can help formalize that and encourage responsible capital to help fund that, you can incentivize miners to move away from the self-processing, which is where a lot of the externalities are concentrated, to a more formalized system of processing that has a better social, environmental, and governance performance. And you can incentivize that financially because the yield enhancement from using formalized processing is sufficient to provide that financial incentive for artisanal miners to use the processing facility. you can use that incentive to then drive upstream formalization. You can redistribute some of the proceeds for the purchase of PPE, more sophisticated mining equipment, improve health and safety standards, but you still need an enabling regulatory regime. If all artisanal mining is banned and illegal, you'll never really solve this problem. You have to create a supportive regulatory environment that rewards, encourages, incentivizes formalization.
Absolutely. Now, Andrew, let's look at the subject of child labor. Obviously, it's very much an economic decision that families make. They say that it's better for our child to be on a mine than in school. How is the World Gold Council helping to change that mindset, to show families, particularly in rural areas, that education is an investment and we can take child labor out of gold mines?
I think it's about, again, goes back to those financial incentives. If you can introduce formalized processing and increase the rewards for the miners and create that financial incentive and increase financial reward for the miners, that frees up finance, that it would allow families to focus on the child's education, focus on developing and creating opportunities for their children rather than relying on them as a source of labor at the mine site. And it's very, very difficult macroeconomic, domestic economic drivers that are placing people in this very, very unfortunate situation. But I think key is to make sure that legitimate ASGM miners are fairly rewarded, because if you look at the supply chain, it's not the miners that benefit. It's really the intermediaries, the traders. They're the ones who are making the most from this, and the miners are actually left aside. So if we can introduce formalized processing, increase the financial rewards for the miners, that creates more opportunities to invest in their children's future rather than relying on them as a source of labor at the mine site.
Absolutely. One final question, Andrew. Now, the theme at this year's Mining Indaba is fostering progress through partnerships. Talk to me about what the World Gold Council is doing with other stakeholders to ensure that we can formalize ASGM.
Well, I think earlier on I was just talking about some of the broader issues that we need to look at. We need to look at customs control. We need to look at enforcement against illegal mining. We need to create an enabling regulatory framework. We need to create incentives to formalize. We need to look at the tax regime and make sure that the tax regime is optimal and isn't distorting the flow of gold. So all of these things are overseen by different stakeholders within countries and also outside. So one of the things that we're doing, which is one of our flagship ASGM programs, is a multi-stakeholder partnership through something called the Global Coalition on ASGM. And it involves three sponsors: the World Gold Council, the World Bank, and the Intergovernmental Forum on Mining, plus a number of different supporting entities that cover different aspects of the supply chain, like law enforcement, like border control, like environmental performance and protection. Bringing all of these stakeholders together on a single platform to create a coherent and multifaceted and integrated approach to trying to solve the many different aspects that are problematic around ASGM.
Okay. Well, Andrew, thank you very much for your insights and for joining us on Mining Review Africa today.
Thank you. Thanks very much.